Hey, Alan Rowland again, and I'm going to change my pace a little bit from my previous presentations, and I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you about a man, and this man meant more to me than any person in my life with the exception of my father, and his name is Winfred Sandlin. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with him. He taught at Walker College for 36 years. He influenced the lives of many young individuals there, and some of you, I'm sure, remember him. So let's go to my camera here, and I'll show you his name. His name is Winfred Gene Sandlin. Here's a photograph of him. That's what he looked like. Some of you probably remember him. And that later in life photograph. Here's a photograph of Mr. Sandlin. Mr. Sandlin in a younger stage of his life. And I'll tell you right now that I worked with Mr. Sandlin, or I knew Mr. Sandlin from 1960 until he passed away in 1913. And in all of that time that I knew him, and I worked side by side with him for many years, he was always Mr. Sandlin. I never referred to him as Winfred. And like I said, when I first met Mr. Sandlin, I was about 11 years of age, and I just, that was the title that I gave to him, and that was the title that I always referred to him as. He always called me Alan, and I considered him to be one of my very closest friends. But for Mr. Sandlin, he was born on a day that was 100 degrees, 24th of September in 1927, and born at Empire, Alabama. I read the other day, this is an account of his early life, and it covers about half of his life. And I'd read it before, but I wanted to get it out again and just review it. And it just tells about his early upbringing. I don't know if you would ever be able to get your hands on a copy of this. It's about 30 pages, I guess. But it really is insightful about early Walker County in the Depression years of Walker County in late 1920s anyway. But anyway, he passed away at the 30th of August in 2013, Jasper, Alabama. More on that in a little bit. For your reference, he is buried in Walker Memory Gardens, and that's in Jasper, Alabama. That is not Oak Hill Cemetery. His parents were John Monroe. His dad went by the name of Monroe. Not very well educated. I think he may have gone to school a little bit in the 3rd grade. His mother was Ila Fuel Sandlin, and she finished the 7th grade. And actually, at that time, if you finished 7th grade, you could teach school, if you can really imagine that there. But his father was just a laborer, mostly worked with the Barton Coal Company, and that's where the family lived. They lived in the Barton Coal Company housing there. And again, if you read that article I was telling you about, it tells you all about that. Later, Mr. Sandlin would marry Marie Bland Sandlin. They married on the 14th of October, 1960. And that was about the time that I first met Mr. Sandlin. They had 3 children. And I can remember John Michael Sandlin very well. Connie, I was trying to stretch my memory on that, and I'm just having a hard time remembering her. And, of course, I remember Carla very well. And as I said, he was raised in Empire, Alabama, went to school there. This is Mr. Sandlin now. Surprising everyone, he graduated from Howard College. Not a bad student by any means, just nobody expected that he would go to college. But he graduated from Howard College at Sanford University today, and went to the University of Alabama, and later had studies at the University of Colorado, Duke University, Tulane University, very well educated individual. All right, and I'll come back and pick up a lot of this in just a little bit, but World War II broke out in 1941, of course, and for Mr. Sandlin, a little bit young there. Remember, he was born in 1927, and he did not enter into the service until 1945, and war was basically over by then, but he was serving in the 1st Cavalry Division, and serving in Japan. And that's where he learned to drive. You read his account there, he talks about if he first learned to drive on an Army Jeep. All right, after the war was over, he worked at the Barton Coal Company from 1947 to 1959. He later became a professor of history and anthropology at Walker College and Jasper for 36 years here. It said 35, but I think I remember him teaching in 1996. He became the chairperson of the social science division there. Personally, I, as a student under Mr. Sandlin in 1967, 1968, I took 2 courses from him in U.S. History, U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2. Later took Anthropology 1, Anthropology 2. And why I didn't take Western Civilization, I don't know. And that would have been very helpful to me later. When Mr. Sandlin retired in 1996, at that time, Walker College had fallen under Bevel State, and at that time, we had 6 biology instructors at Bevel State. I had the qualifications to teach history. I'd been teaching history for 23 years, biology for 23 years, and Bevel State asked me if I would just take over Mr. Sandlin's teaching role in history, and that's where I taught, for the next 24, 25 years, teach the same courses as Mr. Sandlin. I can remember, even though I'd had a lot of experience in teaching biology, Mr. Sandlin invited me to serve as a guest lecturer for one of his history classes and give a lecture on the Battle of Shiloh. And I did that, probably overdid the lectures, as a matter of fact. But that became my first taste first time that I attempted to teach college-level history. And I liked it very much. And when I walked out of that classroom that day, I thought, that is what I want to do for the rest of my life here. Get out of the biology, even though I like biology very much, but get away from those biology labs, and move into something different, a little bit different direction with that of history. All right, so anyway, I owed a lot to Mr. Sandlin. Now, let's see here. He was a member of the First Baptist Church in Jasper, quite a religious individual that I remember, and he wrote the history of the first 100 years of the First Baptist Church. That's in downtown Jasper. It was titled A History of Caring and Sharing. He helped organize the Walker County Heritage Association, and he served as the first president. Some of the other things that Mr. Sandlin was associated with: he was a Sunday school teacher, he was a Boy Scout troop master, and this was of Troop 117 in Jasper, Alabama. I was a member of that troop, and I'll just tell you a few things about this. I can remember my daddy, who was a Boy Scout, and my daddy took me down to First Methodist Church and signed me up to be in Troop 117, and I was awfully young at that time, age 11. And there were some older boys there, and I just wasn't very happy being in the Boy Scout troop, and I was going to drop out. And as it turned out, in the first place, my dad would not let me do that, allow me to do that. And as it turned out, Mr. Sandlin became the scoutmaster. And, of course, I was very close to Mr. Sandlin, and he nurtured me along, and then I felt like a very productive, if you want to call it, career in the Boy Scouts. I made Eagle Scout. I never would have made Eagle Scout without the influence of Mr. Sandlin. And I'll just go ahead and tell you this. I met Mr. Sandlin around 1960. He was a beginning teacher at Walker College. I was only 11 years old at that time. And he and Bill Amundsen lived in a duplex. Mr. Sandlin and his wife lived on the south side of the duplex, and Bill Amundsen and his wife lived on the north side of the duplex. That's where the Rowland Center is present today. There was a little house there, and I was so amazed with Mr. Sandlin, I would come down and sit on his front porch just every morning and wait for him to come out and greet me and talk to me. And I would always ask him, tell me some history stories. Tell me about the Civil War. At that time, we had Civil War trading cards. They were like baseball cards, and I would buy those at the Handy Dandy and take those and show them to Mr. Sandlin, and he would explain them to me, tell him all about that. And I was so fascinated, with all the stories that he would tell me that. He'd tell me about his times of growing up in Empire. I can remember one of the stories I was so fascinated with was he and some friends built a Ferris wheel, and he would always talk about they would hand crank so you could make the seats go over and over, and he would always talk about this girl that had blonde hair, and she was talked into taking a seat on the Ferris wheel, and they would crank and roll her around, and her hair would always go through the mud and through the dirt there. I remember that very well. I failed to tell you this a while ago, but as Mr. Sandlin was growing up, In the Depression years, his family had virtually nothing, but he was always an eager reader and learner, and his mother bought a set of encyclopedias, and that became his favorite books during the Depression years in reading those. His father had a car, which was called, he called it a Willet. I don't know if that's the proper name for it anyway, but Mr. Sandlin gave an account of being run over by that car. His dad backed over him, and the car went right over his chest and almost killed him, and miraculously missed his head. So anyway, that was another amusing story by Mr. Sandlin. But I want to go back to my camera here and share some photographs with you of Troop 117. And I was looking for photographs of Mr. Sandlin, and I could not find one of he. And there was a favorite one I'm looking for, and I just almost tore my house apart trying to find it. And I'll be darned, I cannot find that anyway. But looking at this, this is around 1963, something like that anyway. This sharp-looking cool fellow right here, that's me, that's yours truly, at about 13, 14 years of age. Can't get any cooler than that. Tommy Kilgore here. Here's Steve Byers. He's passed away now. In the background's Tom Nicholson. He's passed away. Tom Sumner. I've lost track of Tom Sumner. I think this is Jim Beach, not real sure here, passed away. Lawson Murphy, and I don't recognize the other individuals over here. But that was a photograph of that time. Mr. Sandlin took the scout troop on a number of, shall we say, scout hikes, and I have still preserved these to this day. My eyes aren't sharp enough to read all of those, but these were Civil War battlefield trails that we hiked here, and I'm just making this part up because I don't remember exactly where they were. But we had Chickamauga battlefield. I know this one is Shiloh battlefield. You had Chattanooga battlefield, which is this one. The white one here that's falling away from this holding there, that's from Vicksburg here. We had Horseshoe Bend, and there's another one there that I cannot recall what it was. And one of the stories I remember about Mr. Sandlin, we were down at battle at Horseshoe Bend, and we had an assistant scoutmaster, I'm not going to call his name, that was with us, and it was later in the night, and a number of the scouts started teasing the assistant scoutmaster, and I was not a part of this because I would not go along with that. It doesn't mean that I was a choir boy, but in that situation I did not get engaged with this. My brother was, though. And anyway, some of the troops there started kind of good-naturedly roughing up the assistant scoutmaster, and I remember Mr. Sandlin just had more than he could take. And now, this is the way that I remember it. I was 13 and 14. The way I remember it, Mr. Sandlin reached over and pulled a tree out of the ground. I'm sure that's not what happened. And he probably just picked up a dead tree or fallen tree. And I can remember he started beating those scouts that were harassing the assistant scoutmaster. My brother was one of those. I remember my brother just frailly flailing for his life there, it seemed like anyway. And anyway, unfortunately, that irritated Mr. Sandlin, and I think that's one of the contributing factors when he made his decision that he was going to leave his position as Scoutmaster Troop 117. And I certainly hated to see that happen. You remember one thing that Mr. Sandlin always prohibited on our scouting trips, our camporees or whatever. He would always tell us, no sardines. Don't anybody bring any sardines. I don't know the reason for that. I've got a little bit of imagination, but I don't know, whatever. Alrighty, so anyway, those are some of the scout hikes. I think they still do those to this very day. Let's see what else I have here. And Mr. Sandlin was a Royal Ambassador leader in Empire. He coached Little League Baseball in Empire. Loved working with young people, like I said, with Boy Scouts and other youth groups here. National traveler, particularly towards the after he retired from the college, toward the end of his retirement year anyway. And one of the stories I remember so very much about him, he and his wife Marie went to Ireland. Mr. Sandlin told me this story. Went to Ireland, and of course, if you travel to the United Kingdom, you go to Ireland, as we in America call it, they drive on the wrong side of the road. And of course, the steering wheel is not on the left side of the car, the steering wheel's on the right side of the car. Everything is backwards with that. And Mr. Sandlin just told me, he said, I just can't figure this out driving on the wrong side of the road in Ireland. And he told his wife, Marie, he said, okay, you're going to be the driver on this trip, and he made her endure that, I can't even imagine that, traveled to Ireland, United Kingdom many, many times. I still can't figure that out driving on the wrong side of the road. Okay, let's go back here. And he was a writer of local history. I showed you that document just a few minutes ago. And I'm just rambling around with a couple of other things about Mr. Sandlin. I can remember when the movie To Kill a Mockingbird came out in the early 1960s, and Mr. Sandlin invited me to go with him. This was in the Downtown Theater in Jasper, Alabama, and I went with him. He took me to see that movie, and I enjoyed that very, very much here. Okay, let's see. Mr. Sandlin had a car which was a Corvair. If you can remember what a Corvair was like, this was about 1962, and I remember the neighborhood boys, this was good-natured, but the neighborhood boys took string and tied string all around the car so he could not get into the car. I don't know why we would do such foolish things such as that. I never saw Mr. Sandlin smoke. I never saw Mr. Sandlin drink in his life. As I said earlier, he worked with youth groups here, and this is always exciting because Mr. Sandlin, certain times of the year, around Christmas or so, would always go up to the Eldridge Children's Home, and he would take a couple of the orphans there and bring them to his home and let them spend Christmas or some of the holiday periods with him. And it was generally a boy or two, and of course that worked well with my brother and I. We always look forward to that because we can make a couple new friends with that. But I've always admired that about Mr. Sandlin, in his working with youth groups. Okay, let's see what else we need to mention here about him. As I said, he was always Mr. Sandlin to me. Never changed that. Never once in my life called him Winfred, even though I worked with him for so many years. In Boy Scouts, we called him Mar Sandlin. Mar Sandlin. I think it had something to do with like Master Sandlin, Mar Sandlin, but that was just what all the Scouts referred to him as. I remember Coach Clem. Coach Clem referred to him as Slats. I guess that's just because he was so thin. Whatever. All right, let me share a couple other photographs with you with Mr. Sandlin. Here he is. You can see Mr. Sandlin here. This is Doris Myers. He was a psychology teacher at Walker College. He's passed away. Here's David Abrams, accountant. He's passed away. This is Clark Schatz. I've lost track of him, and I don't know what happened to him. Another photograph of Mr. Sandlin. This is during his days at Walker College and teaching anthropology. You can see Mr. Sandlin here, and he's holding a skull. And he's showing these Walker College students here, just showing him the various fissures or whatever cranial structures of the skull. All right, a couple of other things here. Photographs of Mr. Sandlin. Here he is. I can remember so much that way. Always had this dry wit. Students loved him. His classes would always fill to the maximum. People liked him so much. Here's another photograph of Mr. Sandlin. There he is, as chairperson at Walker College of the Social Science Division. I'll tell you another kind of amusing story here about Mr. Sandlin. About to lose my camera, it's falling out. I'll tell you another amusing story. Mr. Sandlin was I never even knew this. I never knew this, but he always was balding, and it just never dawned on me. And what Mr. Sandlin had was a comb over. If you understand what I'm talking about, that's where you allow your hair to grow very, very long on one side, and then you comb it over to the top of the head. And I never knew that Mr. Sandlin had that. I just thought it was his regular hair. And back in, I guess it was the 1980s, and I would swim, my friends and I would swim at Memorial Park Pool early in the mornings. We were doing some triathlon training, and Mr. Sandlin would come up there and swim himself, and just recreational swimming. We all had keys to Memorial Park. You wouldn't have that today, but we did at that time anyway. And I can remember one time, I knew Mr. Sandlin had gone up there, and he was swimming in the pool, and I was swimming too, and I finished my swim, and I got out of the pool, and then this bald-headed man got out of the pool, and he started talking to me, and I started thinking, who is that man? And I knew Mr. Sandlin had gone up there, but here was this bald-headed man. And, of course, what had happened right there when Mr. Sandlin had swam, all of his hair that was a comb-over had floated down, gone down to the side. And there I was talking to this bald-headed man, and I didn't even realize it was Mr. Sandlin. Sorry, that's just one of these stories that I remember very well about him. Okay, so let's go back here. And let's see if there's something else I need to mention to you here about him. Mr. Sandlin, he was organized, the chairperson, if you will, the Alpha Phi Omega. That was a Boy Scout organization at Walker College. He was anthropology professor, and he would organize these arrowhead hunts. I would go on some of these, and we'd go out in some place in the county and look for search for arrowheads, and we're always successful with that. And I remember another interesting thing about Mr. Sandlin. My father was a Republican, always was a Republican, and Mr. Sandlin was a Democrat. I wouldn't say that he was a fervent Democrat, but he was. I can remember this, that he was always a strong supporter of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and couldn't understand why anybody would not be a Kennedy supporter. And anyway, so he and my dad, they wouldn't come at odds because they were always very close friends with that, but they just had differing philosophies with that. And I can remember my dad telling me this story about Mr. Sandlin, and this was in the first couple of years of Mr. Sandlin's teaching experience at Walker College. And like many, many instructors, you just feel that you're not connecting with the students. And it's hard for me to imagine that, in the early 1960s, it's quite a bit different than it is today in the 2020s. And I can remember my dad telling me that Mr. Sandlin came to him after the first year or two of teaching, and he just said, I'm not cut out for this. I can't reach the students. I can't touch the students. And I think I'm just going to drop out of teaching and go back to doing, whatever. And my dad sat down with Mr. Sandlin and just told him, he said, look, you're doing a great job. You can't give up on this. Your students adore you. And he convinced Mr. Sandlin to return to the classroom. And, of course, Mr. Sandlin did that and taught, up until 1995, 1996. And honest to goodness, the most popular instructor at Walker College. I've never forgotten that. And I can remember my own frustrations in teaching and thinking the very same thing, that I just can't get to the students. I'm just not reaching those students. And, but I tried to use much of my observation of Mr. Sandlin in the classroom and use those for myself, too. All right, so anyway, unfortunately, Mr. Sandlin passed away. And let's see if I can find this. He passed away on the 30th of August in 2013. This is a service of celebration for the life of Winfred Sandlin, 30th August 2013. And let's see if I can get this open for you. And I just found this desk drawer just a few minutes ago, and I was struggling to get it open. And it shows you the agenda there. Jack Lehman gave the words of remembrance here. And you can see the pallbearers. I was one of the pallbearers. And take Mr. Sandlin to rest, in Walker Memory Gardens. You can see honorary pallbearers there. Likewise, I found this the other day in my desk drawer. This is out of the Daily Mountain Eagle. And it just tells you the obituary about Mr. Sandlin. And I recently visited the gravesite of Mr. Sandlin, and there it is right there in Walker Memory Gardens. And if you wish to visit there, you can do so. And another thing I'd like to tell you about, if you go down to Walker College or Bevel State today, where the gazebo is, and if you put yourself where the gazebo is, and look to the east, you'll see 3 markers there, 3 headstones. Now, one of them is for Mr. Sandlin. I purchased that headstone myself. The other one is for Dr. John Watt, which my father purchased that headstone. And the other one is for Bill Amundsen, who was a master instructor. All of those individuals, master instructors at Walker College. And my dad bought that one. I purchased that one for Bill Amundsen, too. Now, those individuals are not buried there. They're not resting there. Those are just commemorative markers on the Walker College Bevel State campus. Now, campus just as master instructors, of Walker College. All right. I thank you very much for your attention with this. Mr. Sandlin was a wonderful individual here. I'd give anything to sit down and have him tell me some history stories to this day. All right. Thank you.